Hey there guys, this is Cole. Welcome back to another movie review. Today I'm going to be reviewing a 2015 action movie that I watched for the very first time starring Dolph Lundgren and Tony Jaa, and that is the 2015 action movie Skin Trade. So what is the plot to the 2015 movie Skin Trade? The plot of the movie is as follows. After his family is murdered, a detective named Nick Cassidy, played by Dolph Lundgren, tracks the culprit Viktor Dragovic, played by Ron Perlman, to Thailand and teams up with Thai agent Tony Vitayakul, played by Tony Jaa, to bring him to justice and take down Victor's human trafficking ring. So that's the basic plot synopsis to this movie. And I checked out this movie today because it's Monday, and I actually have work off today because of Labor Day week, so that gave me the perfect opportunity to check out this movie today. And secondly, big shout out to Zach D Productions, a YouTuber I'm friends with. He was the one that recommended I check this movie out. He said I would really like this movie. I just finished watching this movie because it was free on Tubi. It's also free on Prime Video, and I gotta say, I really liked this movie. Now, when it comes to Dolph Lundgren as an actor, I have not seen as much of his movies as I have with some of the other action stars of like the 80s and 90s. Like, I have seen much more movies by Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Chuck Norris, and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, from the movies I have seen, I still do really like Dolph Lundgren as an actor, you know. Whether it would be his role as Ivan Drago in Rocky IV, which Rocky IV is a classic. I often debate if Rocky IV or the first movie is my favorite in the franchise. I think they're both on equal ground in terms of being great movies. But I also enjoy him in other movies, like I really like Universal Soldier with him and Jean-Claude Van Damme. That's an action classic. I also enjoy Red Scorpion. I think that's an underrated gem. I really like the first two Expendables movies. I really like this movie, and I really like the Punisher movie. Not the one with Thomas Jane, but the one from 1989 with Dolph Lundgren. But yeah, Dolph Lundgren I've always liked as an actor, and I rather enjoyed this movie. So without further ado, let's get into my movie review. So the movie starts off with an Asian girl named Selena who goes on a bus. So the movie starts off with an Asian girl named Selena who is a teenager, and she goes on a bus and she is basically drugged by these two pedos. Then she wakes up strapped to a bed panicking, you know, because she isn't really familiar with where she is and she's freaking out and stuff like that. Then the movie then cuts to our main character, Nick Cassidy, played by Dolph Lundgren, who is chasing down one of Victor's partners. But then Nick interrogates one of Victor's partners, and then Victor says to him, Victor is in New Jersey, but Nick does not believe a single thing the guy is saying, and he says, BS, why? But then Victor's partner says to Nick, that's all I know, okay? Look, Nick, you don't know who you are messing with. These Serbs, okay, they're not like the Italians, they're not even like the Russians, okay? They have no code. While this is going on, Tony, played by Tony Jaa, is at a building, you know. He's basically at a building as an undercover agent, and he is pretending to be on the bad guy's side. However, the bad guys do not believe what he's saying, so they basically ask him to, you know, to basically be a creep like they are, like a pedo. But obviously, Tony, played by Tony Jaa, is not going to do that. So then Tony, he starts fighting the bad guys, like whipping one of them with his belt and aims a gun at one of the bad guys. And then I like the scene where Tony interrogates one of the bad guys, asking where the delivery is, while holding the bad guy by his one leg hanging off the side of the building. But then the bad guy basically tells Tony the correct info, and that the main villain of the movie, Victor, will be at the location that he told him. And I like the part when the bad guy says, "Pull me up. You can have the girl we kidnapped. You can have the girl we kidnapped. No charge. I promise. I'll throw her sister in too. Okay, huh?" But then I like the part when he says, "I told you everything I need to know." But then I like the part when Tony looks at the girl who's permanently scarred. But then Tony just decides to, and then I like the part where Tony drops this bad guy off a building, and we don't see it, but we hear the bad guy's body splat on the ground and some people screaming. And I like the part where Tony says after that, "Negotiation is over." But then Tony says to the girl, "Go back to your family. Don't trust people so easily." The girl then takes the money Tony gave her, and then, decides to get out the building and go home to her family. Then we are introduced to the bad guy Victor, played by Ron Perlman. Yes, original Hellboy actor. He plays a bad guy in this movie, and I thought he gave a pretty good performance. But like I said, we're introduced to the main villain Victor, played by Ron Perlman, who's talking at a dinner table, and you just get the idea how bad and disgusting Victor is as a person. Then the main character of the movie, Nick Cassidy, played by Dolph Lundgren, is at the police station with Reed, who is played by Michael Jai White, and we are introduced to the police chief Costello, and I did not know this. The police chief in this movie is actually played by Peter Weller. Yes, the original actor who played RoboCop in the 1987 action movie RoboCop. So it was cool to see him as the police chief in this movie, as I've always really liked Peter Weller as an actor. And Costello is talking to everyone as he's the police chief, and he says, "We are going to make sure that coming to America is the worst decision Victor ever made." Not long after that, Victor blames the death of his son on one of his workers and says, and Victor says to one of his men, "Where I come from, men are accountable for their actions." And then he makes one of his other workers shoot Andre, the guy that he's basically interrogating. But then Victor decides to shoot both of them. And then all of the cops and Nick, who were basically hiding in position, decide to go out and go after the bad guy. This movie was directed by a guy named Ikachi Ukrantham. I think that's how you say the name. I could be wrong on that. I'm not too familiar with this director's work, but I thought he did a great job with this movie, especially when it comes down to the action scenes and the way they were filmed. I like the part where Reed, played by Michael Jai White, kicks one of the bad guys in the face. That's a pretty good action scene. Then the scene where Nick and Victor shoot at each other is great. And then Nick shoots one of Victor's men, but then Victor is arrested by Nick. And I like the part when one of the people who works at the interrogation room basically not work at the interrogation room, but basically a lawyer that Victor has that decided to come into the police station says, "I am here to not really one of Victor's men, but basically one of the guys who works at the place." He basically says to the police chief, Costello, played by Peter Weller, he says to him, "I'm here to monitor my client's rights." But then I like the part when Police Chief Costello, played by Peter Weller, says, "Really? His human rights? Are you effing kidding me? You're lucky I don't poke your effing eyes out." And I really like the way he delivered that line. And then he says to Reed, he says, "Let me know when he's gone, Reed." And I like the whole scene where in the interview room where Nick is interrogating Victor, Victor says to Nick, "You should have killed me in that dockyard, detective." But then Nick basically says, and then Nick says to him, "How can you sleep at night? How do you do this? Buy and sell human lives." But then Victor says, "Ask my customers. When they stop buying, I stop selling." However, even though Victor was arrested, his men are still at large operating his human trafficking ring. Then Tommy, one of Tony's partners, shows up, fights the bad guy, fights some of the bad guys, and rescues a girl. Then the girl informs him that the bad guys want revenge on Nick for Nick killing one of Victor's partners. Later that night, Nick Cassidy, played by Dolph Lundgren, shows up to his house to say goodnight to his daughter. And one thing I really like about this movie, you definitely buy Nick as a loving, caring father, and you bought the fact that his daughter and his wife love him back. Like, I thought the actors' chemistry was really good in this movie. And the whole scene where Victor's men shoot, and the whole action scene where Victor's men shoot a rocket launcher into Nick's house and basically kill his wife, and, you know, we hear his daughter panicking and gunshots, like, that whole scene where Nick has to witness that, like, that's definitely an intense scene, and the bad guys do that to get revenge on Nick for killing one of Victor's men, and that's definitely an intense scene, and Nick, played by Dolph Lundgren, is a likable character. You want to see him get revenge on these bad guys and avenge his family. But then the next morning, Nick wakes up in the hospital and he's informed by Costello, played by Peter Weller, and Reed, played by Michael Jai White, that his family was killed. And you definitely buy the sadness by the character Nick, because I thought Dolph Lundgren was really good in this movie. But then there's the whole scene where Nick escapes the hospital when no one's looking to seek revenge on the people who killed his family. But then I like the scene when Nick is interrogating Victor's men with a shotgun, asking where's Victor, you know, as Victor escaped jail. And Nick is given the answer, and then he goes to where he was told that Victor's at to get revenge. Eventually, the hospital notices that Nick is gone, and Tony, along with the other cops, try to find him. They basically track Nick's location to an airport. Now, not long after this, when no one's looking, Nick decides to, like, get out of sight, and he's hiding in, like, one of those parking lots that you see in the airport. And when no one is looking, Reed, played by Michael Jai White, he shoots Tony's partner, who looks pretty similar to Tony, and gives Nick the gun. And he says, "Here, Nick, take the gun." And basically, Reed basically lies to Tony, saying Nick has gone crazy, and Tony believes the lie that, you know, that Reed told him. And the actions, you know, and I gotta say, the action chase scene with Nick and Tony is exciting, where they're going at each other. And later that night, like, you know, the fact that his family died, like, it really takes a toll on Nick. Like, like Nick Cassidy, played by Dolph Lundgren, he has dark PTSD flashbacks to the death of his family the previous night. Later that night, Nick interrogates one of Victor's men, asking where Janko is. And, you know, Janko was the guy who works with Victor to sell the kids. And when the bad guy refuses to answer Nick stabs the guy in the hand with a screwdriver. Then he gives Nick the answer, and then Nick basically breaks the bad guy's hand, you know, stabs him in the neck with a screwdriver, and kicks him through a glass window, which is definitely a well-done action scene. Not long after that, Tony shows up to fight Nick again, but Nick gets away. But then not long after that, Nick shows up to a warehouse to rescue the teen girls that were kidnapped by the creeps. And I really do like the action scene where Nick Cassidy, played by Dolph Lundgren, beats up two men that kidnapped the girls, and Nick tells the kids to stay put where they're at. Tony then interrogates Nick with a shotgun up to his neck, and he's not believing a single thing Nick says. Nick says, I did not kill your partner. And then Nick decides to tell Tony the truth, and he tells him that Reed shot Tony's partner. He said that Reed shot your partner with his own weapon, which he gave to me. And, you know, Tony believes him, but then not long after that, Reed, played by Michael Jai White, he starts to shoot at both Nick and Tony, who must fight against Reed. After the fight is over, Reed tells Nick and Tony that he tells him the truth, that Victor paid him to do this, and Reed says, "Screw these girls, they'll rot where they go anyways." And then I like the part where Tony says, "And you will rot in Hell," and then he shoots Reed. Then Nick and Tony team up to save the day. And I will say, I do like the twist in this movie, which there will be spoilers for those who haven't seen this movie. So if you don't want this movie spoiled, click off the review. But I like how we thought that Nick's daughter was, And I like the twist in this movie. I like how we initially thought that Nick's daughter was dead, but it's revealed that she's alive, being held hostage by Victor, the main bad guy of the movie, played by Ron Perlman. But then Nick, played by Dolph Lundgren, and Tony, played by Tony Jaa, show up to defeat Victor and take down the human trafficking ring once and for all. And the final fight in this movie is great, where Nick and Victor are fighting, and Victor says to Nick, "Too bad you'll never see your daughter again." And this upsets Nick, but before he can do anything, Victor stabs him in the chest with a knife, but then Nick pulls the knife out of his stomach and then stabs Victor with it, asking where his daughter is, but Victor's laughing, and then he dies in his arms. And then there's a huge explosion, and then the movie ends where Nick and Tony, they're basically talking, and they suspect that the daughter might be alive, but we don't know for sure. And then the movie ends with Nick going home on a train, and Nick narrates, "I don't know where my daughter is, but I have hope that she's still alive." And then he says at the end of the movie, narrating wise, he says, "Wherever this journey takes me, I'll go and I will find my daughter." And then the movie ends. So yeah, at the end of the day, I do really like this movie. These are just small little minor nitpicks. If I do have any flaws with the movie, the action scenes are great, but I don't like how they over-rely on a bunch of CGI. Like, now granted, it's not some of the worst CGI, but I'm just not too big on the CGI in this movie. But I will give credit. I do like how most of this movie is done with practical effects. And I guess my final nitpick is, I do not like the fact that this movie ends on a cliffhanger, and we're probably not going to get a sequel anyways because Dolph Lundgren said he wants to retire, so that's unfortunate. But other than that, at the end of the day, I thought Skin Trade was a really good action movie. I would recommend it. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to give Skin Trade an 8 out of 10. So yeah, guys, thank you guys so much for watching my review. And next up, I will continue the Jurassic Park / Jurassic World series with the next review, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. But until then, we'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye.